Tonight on Ukraine Today. Ukraine's new weapons, the maker of the Flamingo cruise missile is now working on 2 ballistic ones. First details are out. Zelensky meets Putin? What new unacceptable offer the Russian dictator just voiced? Trump's inaction. Why does the US president keep choosing words over actions? Security guarantees for Ukraine. According to France's leader, the work is finished and ready for political approval. All this and more right now. Hello, my name is Volodymyr Robchun. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and let's go to the news. Let's start with new Ukrainian defense industry projects. The maker of the Flamingo cruise missile is now working on 2 ballistic ones, FP7 and FP9. This comes from the Militarny news portal. Both missiles will launch from ground platforms. The FP7 has a range of up to 200 kilometers, speed up to 1,500 meters per second, and maximum payload 150 kilograms. The FP9 has a range up to 855 kilometers, speed 2,200 meters per second, and payload up to 800 kilograms. Now to enemy losses. In the last 24 hours, Russia lost at least 840 soldiers killed and wounded. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, that's already 1,085,410 soldiers. Also, Ukrainian forces destroyed 4 Russian armored vehicles, 43 artillery systems and dozens of other pieces of enemy equipment. And now, let's check the August results. Ukraine's drone forces successfully attacked 17 oil facilities in Russia. In fact, more than 24% of Russia's oil refining capacity is now out of service. Ukraine became the first country in the world to use AI-powered drone swarms on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Russians learn how to control their Shahed drones online and even target moving objects. Next, the growing drone war.
AI-powered drone swarms have already entered the battlefield. At this new frontier of warfare, Ukraine is using technology that allows groups of drones to communicate and make decisions independently of their operator.
According to Western journalists, Ukraine is employing artificial intelligence in military operations so that groups of drones can coordinate their actions to attack well-defended Russian positions. Military experts claim that operations involving large and small groups of drones represent a new stage in the war. Such innovations make it possible to deploy dozens or even thousands of drones simultaneously to overcome any air defense systems and target defenses, whether it's a city or a specific military facility.
If it becomes possible to scale up production and so-called swarm attacks occur, meaning when a swarm is flying, it's clear that you can shoot down part of the swarm, but you can't shoot down 100 drones flying at the same time. Well, in that case, of course, there will be major disruptions to the power grid, significant disruptions to the transportation system, and the destruction of normal life will begin. We actually saw this earlier this year with air transport, and now we're seeing it with railways. This drone war has made Russia weak. It's impossible to deploy air defense systems everywhere. There simply aren't enough of them.
Analysts insist that this innovative technology is a harbinger of the future of warfare. Meanwhile, at the Ukrainian company that developed the unique software, they are lifting the veil of secrecy a bit about what to expect from this new military development. It turns out that a swarm of strike drones, like a living organism, analyzes what is happening in real time and makes decisions based on the situation.
The drones can decide which one will strike first and adapt to circumstances. For example, if one of them runs out of battery. Ukrainian forces began using this technology about a year ago for laying mines. Since then, it has been used to target Russian troops, equipment, and infrastructure.
And it must be admitted they are using it extremely effectively. In the Kremlin, just hearing the phrase drone swarm makes their knees shake. Even the enemy admits that they simply have nothing to counter such advanced Ukrainian weaponry.
They are truly impressive.
By the way, if something goes wrong during such an autonomous operation, the system immediately hands control over to a human operator. Fortunately, another cutting-edge Ukrainian technology, the Kolibri 13 FR1, promises to help with this. This is a so-called relay drone for FPV, featuring autonomous navigation and resistance to electronic warfare. It's an inexpensive alternative to the Chinese DJI, which is widely used on the front lines.
At the very beginning of the Russian invasion, Russia was striking Ukraine with missiles and drones almost unopposed, while Ukraine had virtually nothing to respond with against Russian territory. But now, as they say, here we are. Now Ukraine has drones that are taking out Russian industry. Ukraine has acquired long-range missiles, but as Putin says, the special military operation is going according to plan. Apparently this is part of the plan too.
The new domestically produced UAV is not just a drone, it's an entire system that includes 2 carrier relays, a ground control station, and additional antennas. This approach makes it possible to maintain a stable communication channel at the tactical level. The drone's design is modular, which allows for quick replacement of damaged components right on the battlefield. Among the advantages of the Ukrainian Colibri are its resistance to strong winds, low temperatures, and the ability to operate both day and night.
When they are taught to interact with each other, when they are taught to guide each other to targets, or let's say to cover each other, just like we see at various Chinese shows, where drones perform all sorts of beautiful formations in the sky. It will be the same thing, only in war. That would of course be an absolute nightmare, and it's completely unclear how anyone could fight against it if drones are taught to think, so to speak, to make their own decisions. Especially if drones are taught to make decisions about engaging targets. That would be a total and utter nightmare.
So how is the Kremlin responding to all of this? Instead of developing new types of air defense systems, Putin is channeling all the efforts of the Russian defense industry into creating more and more methods of terror. In particular, they are actively improving their Shahed drones, training them to strike residential buildings of peaceful Ukrainians with even greater precision. This unpleasant news was recently shared with us by a military radio technology specialist with the call sign Flash. According to him, Russian mopeds have recently become much more dangerous and deadly.
Here's a fresh discovery just now. See those antennas mounted on the wingtips? Modems and cameras. Unfortunately, unlike the circuit boards, we can't manage to find them. They get disassembled and burned. For those who don't know, this is a new version of the Shahed drone which can be controlled online from Russia, can conduct reconnaissance and even attack moving targets.
However, to be fair, the Ukrainian defense industry began working on improving Ukraine's air defense system long before this. By staying ahead of the enemy, our engineers are already actively developing our own version of HIMARS. The foreign rocket system has proven its effectiveness on the battlefield, its high accuracy, and its ability to operate at long distances. That's exactly what we need. For Ukraine, having its own counterpart to American weaponry means not only reducing dependence on Allied supplies, but also the ability to adapt the system to modern warfare conditions and the specifics of combat operations. While the technical specifications of the Ukrainian system have not yet been disclosed, experts suggest that it involves a wheeled platform with high mobility, capable of launching guided missiles at distances of hundreds of kilometers. So it's high time for the occupiers to start preparing for new surprises from the Ukrainian armed forces.
The terrorist state, Russia, keeps striking civilian targets in Ukraine. The State Emergency Service showed the aftermath of Russian strikes on Odessa. A warehouse caught fire and a truck was damaged. Fresh footage also shows the aftermath in the Kharkiv region, where 5 people were injured. Russians hit private homes, a business, a critical infrastructure. Earlier, Russians shelled Konstantinivka in the Donetsk region. They used artillery and FPV drones to hunt civilians. 9 people were killed, 7 wounded. 2 apartment buildings, a private house, a store, a shopping mall, several kiosks, and a civilian car were damaged. According to the OSINT analysts, Russia is preparing the final battle for the rest of the Donetsk region. They say this is the largest regrouping of Russian troops since the assault on Kiev back in 2022. President Zelensky earlier mentioned about 100,000 Russian troops near Pokrovsk. On occupied part of the Zaporizhzhia region, Russian soldiers raped 2 schoolgirls. And this is just one example of their crimes. Up next, the real face of the so-called Russian world.
Alina and Rita live in the Zaporizhzhia region in Russian-occupied territory, 15 kilometers from the front line. Alina is 14 years old and her mother is raising her along with her older brother. The family's income is small, 30,000 rubles. But despite constant shelling and a lack of money, the mother has no plans to move anywhere with her children.
Here, people have their own homes, their own roofs over their heads. Someone has a chicken, someone else has a duck, some have planted a garden. In other words, everyone tries to save money however they can. Alina's mother,
Rita is a year older than Alina. She also has a brother and a sister, and they are raised by their single father. Their mother died a couple of years ago from cancer.
In the evening, Alina and Rita were walking around the village when a civilian car with soldiers stopped next to them. Two men invited the schoolgirls over, offering them drinks. The girls agreed. They were taken to an abandoned lot in Lesnoy. There, in a camper, one of the soldiers raped Alina. A week later, the teenagers went to these men's house again, wanting to get revenge. This time, the same soldier who had assaulted Alina raped Rita. The publication Vestka.
After the incident, it turned out that one of the girls had the rapist's bank card and the schoolgirls had been communicating with the Russian soldiers even before the incident. Relatives of the girls told the publication Verska about the rape of the schoolgirls in the village of Lesnoye in the Zaporizhzhia region. A source in the police confirmed that a report was filed regarding this incident. Rita's sister said that the schoolgirls knew the soldiers and had communicated with them before. The men gained the teenagers' trust by lying that they knew Maria, Alina's mother, well.
the girls have no brains. They were told it was better not to talk to them, not to get into the car, basically not to get involved in such trouble. You see, these are men, and men can be different. The situation can also be different. But these silly girls took them at their word. Lyubov, Rita's sister.
The girls filed a report of rape with the police, but they did not receive a medical examination, since the schoolgirls had been raped more than a week earlier. There is no biological evidence. The military police caught 2 suspected rapists. The detainees turned out to be military officers, each with 20 years of service, Sultan Gasanov and Janibek Janbershiev from the 38th Brigade. Janbershiev is 37 years old, born in Kazakhstan, lives in the Amur region, was married, and now his child is 14 years old, the same age as the raped girls. Gasanov is 39 years old and originally from Dagestan. The Russian rapist is very active on social media. On Instagram, he posted photos with his wife, teenage daughter, and son. In a phone conversation with journalists, Gasanov confirmed that he had sex with 2 schoolgirls. First twice with Alina and then once with Rita. And they had known each other for a week and a half before that.
The car is driving by, they turn around and laugh. Do you understand what it means to behave provocatively? That is to draw attention to themselves. It's not just girls walking down the street. They turn around, look, laugh, and nudge each other. Kind of playful. The very fact that this was rape can be refuted even by the fact that they came to us repeatedly. Sultan Gasanov, Russian military officer.
Gasanov, a model family man, is ready to accept punishment, but at the moment he remains free. The second rapist refused to speak with the publication. The story of Alina and Rita's rape is not an isolated incident. Recently, cases of sexual violence have become more frequent in the temporarily occupied territories, affecting both women and teenagers. In almost all cases, the perpetrators are soldiers of the Russian army. The local police usually cover up such cases. In June and July of this year alone, a series of attacks on local girls was recorded in Melitopol and the Melitopol district, which is in the Zaporizhzhia region. According to local residents, at least 4 incidents occurred. 2 girls were brutally beaten and raped, and 2 others went missing.
They say that the attacks involved servicemen from the so-called Dagestanis. People are even afraid to say the names of the missing out loud. Everyone understands that the military is behind this, which means there will be no investigation. A resident of Melitopol.
A similar situation is unfolding in the occupied parts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. For example, in May in Donetsk, a 17-year-old girl was lured into an apartment under false pretenses. A man who claimed to be a police officer took her away supposedly to process some documents, but instead raped her. The perpetrator turned out to be a 28-year-old Russian serviceman from the 110th Motorized Rifle Brigade. He committed the crime on his own birthday. Sexual violence in the occupied territories of Ukraine is not a series of isolated incidents, but a systemic problem. The Wild West, that's what Russian soldiers call the Ukrainian territories that have been under occupation for the 3rd year now. Almost always, the occupiers' acts of rape go unpunished because there is simply no law on the temporarily occupied lands of Ukraine.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. click the link in the description to become our sponsor. And right now is a good time to subscribe and like this video and share it as well, so more people can see it. Thank you and glory to Ukraine. Meanwhile, work on security guarantees for Ukraine is finished and ready for political approval. That's what French President Emmanuel Macron said before the Coalition of the Willing meeting.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The guarantees include support for Ukraine's defense forces, sending troops for peacekeeping and commitment from the US. But all this is after a ceasefire, and Russia clearly has no intention to stop. The dictator Putin, while killing Ukrainian civilians, keeps dragging out talks with unacceptable proposals. His latest? He said that if Zelensky is ready, he can come to Moscow.
I have never refused this, if such a meeting is well prepared and could lead to some possible positive results. By the way, Donald asked me if possible to hold such a meeting. I said yes, it is possible. Well, in the end, if Zelensky is ready, let him come to Moscow.
There is no need to add that he refuses to meet Zelensky. His actions and offers already show it. Moscow? Seriously? Better idea. Let him come to Kyiv. We can even guarantee his safe delivery straight to Hague. Ukraine's Foreign Minister, Andriy Sybiha, reminded that at least 7 countries are ready to host the meeting between Zelensky and Putin. Austria, the Vatican, Switzerland, Turkey and 3 Arab states of the Persian Gulf. Real offers, and President Zelensky is ready anytime. Also, the MFA of Ukraine reacted to Putin's words about achieving goals by military means if diplomacy fails. Diplomats reminded him more than 1 million of his soldiers are killed or wounded. After 1,000 days of war, Russia controls only 1% of Ukraine's territory and just 0.3% gained during the summer offensive. Russia spends $1 billion a day on war, while its social infrastructure collapses and the economy falls apart. In short, their so-called victory machine may break down before they solve the Ukrainian question by force. It will be interesting to see how Donald reacts now. The same Donald who, according to Putin, asked him if possible to meet with Zelensky. I dare assume we are talking about the US President Donald Trump. By the way, while speaking with reporters at the White House, a Polish journalist asked Trump why he had often expressed disappointment with Putin but never took any action. The US president said this.
Would you say that putting secondary sanctions on India, the largest purchaser outside of China, they're almost equal, would you say there was no action? That cost hundreds of billions of dollars to Russia. You call that no action? And I haven't done phase 2 yet or phase 3. But when you say there's no action, I think you ought to get yourself a new job. Because if you remember, 2 weeks ago I said, if India buys, India's got big problems. And that's what happened. So don't tell me about that.
Trump also said that Zelensky and Putin are not ready to talk yet, but soon something will happen. What exactly? As usual, no details. Maybe phase 2 and phase 3. Phases of what, you may ask? I don't know. Maybe the phase of waiting another 2 or 3 weeks. And finally, the new territorial conflict brewing? The Kremlin accuses Japan of preparing new claims against Russia, not stopping at the Kuril Islands. All the details in our next story.
Russia is preparing for yet another war. The dispute over the Kuril Islands is gaining momentum.
And here, it's a complicated issue.
Moscow has stated that Japan is planning to put forward new territorial claims against Russia. According to Putin's aide Nikolai Patrushev, this poses a direct threat to the national security of the Russian Federation. From his point of view, Tokyo's policy, which seeks the return of the islands, is driven by commercial interests.
What the Japanese need today is not justice regarding the so-called northern territories, but resources, both mineral and biological. The sea depths around the Kuril Islands have a unique hydrography.
Russia is a vassal of China, while China and Japan are strategic adversaries. Therefore, any significant outburst from Patrushev or indeed from President Putin or anyone else from the influential Russian ruling elite is, in a very important way, a clear kind of diplomatic gesture and a profound message from Moscow towards its senior and strategically vital partner, Beijing. So it's probably not worth being surprised by this statement. But overall, it's also important to understand that Russia is aggressively disposed toward any representative of the Western Bloc.
Patrushev also emphasized that Russia will not sit idly by in the face of Tokyo's militarization policy and will strengthen its defensive capabilities in the Far East.
Russia consistently and repeatedly uses claims that someone or some entity allegedly wants to attack it as a convenient and often cited pretext for its acts of aggression, both historically and in the present day. This pattern of behavior has been observed repeatedly over time. This has always been the case, without exception, and the most recent wars that Russia started also began in roughly the same way. In other words, Russia never attacks first. This is the foundation of their ideology. It always claims to be repelling someone else's attack. Therefore, from the perspective of official Russian statements and the intricate nuances of Russian diplomacy, accusing someone of allegedly wanting to attack the Russian Federation is always, without exception, a significant and indeed a very clear initial step toward the potential launching of aggressive actions or even outright aggression against that particular entity or nation.
First and foremost, it's about wanting to appear a certain way, not actually being that way. At the present moment, Russia does not have enough resources to wage a full-scale war with Ukraine, prepare for a potential invasion of the Baltic states, and at the same time build up military resources in the Far East. Rather, it's more of a declaration of intent and once again a message to China that in the context of confrontation with Chinese adversaries, Russia is ready to be a major ally and, well, a junior partner in any initiative coming from Beijing.
And once again, the aide to the Russian dictator has stated that Russia rightfully owns the islands, and there's nothing to discuss here.
Their legal status is currently disputed, since Japan considers them, well, their territory, while Russia controls these territories, but Japan does not legally recognize this.
The point is that for more than 70 years, the two countries have been unable to sign a peace treaty because of the territorial dispute over the Kuril Islands. Tokyo names the return of the islands as the main condition for signing the treaty. But the Kremlin believes that the Southern Kurils became part of the USSR as a result of World War II, and their sovereignty is beyond question.
The relevant Kuril Islands, including some islands that Japan refers to as the Northern Territories and claims are not directly related to the Kuril Islands themselves, were occupied by the Soviet Union. But this was never legally finalized in the form of a specific treaty. And now the prospects for this treaty are looking more and more doubtful. That is, even back in Yeltsin's time, there was a draft of a corresponding treaty that would have settled all issues, particularly the territorial ones. There was an interesting proposal that Russia would return 2 small islands to Japan. In exchange, Japan would recognize Russia's control over the 2 remaining, slightly larger islands. And in this way, a kind of diplomatic solution would be found. But at that time, it all fell through.
The Russian dictator and the former Prime Minister of Japan met 25 times in an attempt to reach an agreement on the islands, but without success. And after the constitution was amended, the transfer of any part of Russian territory was made illegal.
In Russia, the law and the constitution are not considered absolutely unbreakable norms. Putin himself was only supposed to serve 2 terms according to the constitution, but he is still in power. And the Russian constitution has been changed so many times that I think the essence of the problem isn't really about the constitution, but rather about Putin's personal desire to demonstrate his imperial grandeur. But Putin is not eternal, and Russian imperialism is not eternal either.
In March of 2023, the Russian Federation officially ended all peace treaty negotiations with Japan, which had strongly supported Western sanctions and other punitive measures after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share. See you next time.